Testing 1, 2. My son just brought me a couple eggs, so it's actually perfect timing. I'm going to let this intro run. The intro is going to be mostly musical for the first part. I just got to find my song again. Shoot. Good to see everybody. I hope people are in a good mood, and I hope people aren't getting swept away by the kinds of things that are happening in the news right now. Good to see everybody. Free Mayonnaise. Arthur, good to see you. Please share it out. I think I should also be live on the tube. Let me just check that quick. It says excellent connection, so I think that looks pretty good as well. See you in a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. Feel free to share it.
Shouldn't just be a few people that are leaders. Everybody has to figure out their own leader inside themselves. If they're too shy to go approach somebody in person, then stick a card or a flyer on someone's car next to you every time you park your car. Stick a card inside of a gas station credit card slot every time you get gas. If everybody that is aware of the truth and awake to the truth started to do these things, we can touch people, the hearts and minds of people, one person at a time in day-to-day living. We don't need these echo chambers online where we're all repeating to the same followers most of the time. We get a few new people, but I think we really need more people to take what they're learning and get out there and touch the people that they're in a community with.
By about 1660, John Locke wrote that day laborers and tradesmen, spinsters and dairymaids must be told what to believe. The greatest part cannot know, and therefore they must believe.
On every slide, the first slide, I have quotes, and I know that you don't read them at all because you don't need to read them to pass or get a good grade. But this one is pretty cool. The quote from Alice in Wonderland: "One can't believe impossible things," said Alice. "I dare say you haven't had much practice," said the Queen. "Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." So that's totally suitable for this lecture. A lot of impossible things are going to happen today.
I mean, can you be any more ridiculous in your self-lampooning? Or maybe it was just an absolute admission. He says it right at the beginning of his course. And he leaves out part of the quote that says, "When I was your age, I always did it for a half an hour a day." It's not accidental, ladies and gentlemen.
So that is what I've been predicting all the time, that ultimately this evolution would inevitably lead to the emergence of a highly virulent variant that would cause waves of hospitalization and severe disease in highly vaccinated countries. Of course, always the same, only in highly vaccinated countries, right?
Sorry. Well, that's a relief.
It's literally turning into worst case scenario. The latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst case scenario. I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst case scenario. I'm afraid that the latest data tells us that we're dealing with essentially a worst case scenario.
But you can tell if someone's lying. You know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie. You know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's like really important not to be a liar.
Specialization should make you suspicious. It should, because if it's gotten harder to evaluate what's going on, then it's presumably gotten easier for people to lie and to exaggerate. And then one should be, a little bit suspicious. And that's sort of my starting bias.
Our love was meant to be the kind of love to last forever, and I want you here with me from tonight until the end of time.
And It's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't.
Always on my mind, in my heart, in my soul. Baby, you're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life.
Amazing, JJ.
Wow,
Really,
that's a very nice compliment. Thank you very much. Can you hear me better now or not?
yes.
Much better.
It was really like it nailed down two things for me, but I finally really understand the infectious clone idea. Tape analogy, because that really, really hit home for me, and I think people would love to hear that analogy because.
When we're together, now I know that I need you here with me. From tonight until the end of time, you should know, everywhere I go, always on my mind, you're in my heart, in my soul. You're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. Wanna have you near me? I wanna have you hear me say it. No one needs you more than I. No one needs you more than Wanna have you near me? I wanna have you hear me say it. No one needs you more than I need you. You're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. When you love somebody till the end of time. When you love somebody, always on my mind. No one needs you more than I. When you love somebody till the end of time. When you love somebody, always on my mind. No one needs you more than I. When you love somebody till the end of
Good morning, everybody. Excuse me. Welcome to the show. That is indeed Chicago, the voice of Peter Cetera, among others. I'm not sure if at that time also was the drummer already that famous dude too, and like, yeah, the Chicago's a really cool band. Good to good to see everybody. How not to say murder. Not to mention supplemental oxygen induces acute respiratory distress syndrome, step 1. Step 2, not to mention a lack of antibiotic use. Step 3, do not mention the multi-year opioid crisis. Not explain PCR as a fraud. Do not mention injection versus ingestion. And do not mention the population pyramids of the West. Definitely do not mention Brandy Vaughn. I'm really happy to be here. I do have this book of his, and I did get it signed by him. That's a real picture there. This is a supporter of the stream, a good friend of mine, Jeff. Good to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. In fact, those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what to say other than you need to process this is a statement that someone made in 1924. And if you find yourself skillfully using social media in 2025, this is a message for you. You cannot escape if you think the truth is available there. It was never available on TV, and it is certainly not available there now. What you see in this slide, for example, are at least 1, 2, 3 insiders that are talking to somebody who likely doesn't understand that these 3 are coordinating their actions, their questions, their focus, and making him feel like he is speaking out and being heard, when in reality, they are manipulating him to make sure that his opinions are used only in the way that this invisible government would like it to be used. There's also in this one probably 1, maybe 2, maybe only 1 person who knows better, and the rest of them are just not sophisticated enough to see that there are liars out there. Liars like probably David Baltimore, probably like Robert Malone, probably like Jessica Rose, probably like a lot of biologists that actually know. But none of these people that are in front of us need to know. And when you see 2 actors on stage like this and accept the fact that they're asking the right questions and coming up with reasonable answers, you are already enslaved. And that's why I choose these 2 guys in particular. I think Steve Bannon has been wonderfully identified as somebody who is part of this little orchestrated theater. And I think his long track record, i.e. resume, would reveal that if anybody cared to see it. The voice you hear is the voice of Jonathan Couey. I come to you live from my garage in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am the chief biologist of Gigaohm Biological. I spent about, more than 15 years chasing tenure as an academic biologist. You can find the work or the evidence of that work on the PubMed website of the National Library of Medicine. There's even some evidence of my early contributions to the Lab Leak Scooby-Doo theater, of which I was an unwitting participant for almost 3 years. I have presented my thoughts and perspectives to the group Panda no less than 3 times. Once to the National Citizens Inquiry in Canada, once to the trustees of the Wellness Company, countless times behind the scenes to Children's Health Defense employees and staff, as well as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and that culminated in me being listed as an expert responsible for helping to write this Wuhan book. I was also able to present at Edward Griffin's Red Pill Conference last year. Perhaps that was one of the highlights of this very sort of macabre theater that I've been an unwitting participant in. I don't necessarily say that G. Edward Griffin is part of that theater, but I do think that a vast majority of the people that are in this are playing along. If you want to support this work, you can go to gigaohmbiological.com, and I very much appreciate those that do. I just got a envelope from Rick in the Pennsylvania area, who I think is usually in the YouTube chat. Thank you very much, Rick. And also a letter from Jen this week. Thank you very much, Jen. You guys are both very generous, and that will probably be spent at the local co-op this week. If you want to send anything directly to me, it's JJCouey at P.O. Box 802, Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, 15102. The stream is usually archived at stream.gigaohm.bio. Sometimes that's not a perfect connection, but you can download those videos and watch them offline. And you can communicate with me via email there, or else via the open chat at gigaohm.bio. Thank you, Ted, for helping me keep those going.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. The goal is to win.
What time is it? Game time! Woo!
Good morning again, everybody. We are definitely in interesting times. People behaving in very interesting ways. You got to watch for patterns. You got to hold them to account. You got to listen to the words they use. And more importantly, you got to pay attention to the words they don't. They've been occupying a lot of our time. They've been occupying a lot of our thoughts. And it hasn't been useful for us. It hasn't been useful for our family. Because they're occupying our consciousness for the slavers. That's what they're doing. They've been teaching us slave speak for a couple generations now. Our parents taught us slave speak unwittingly. And right now, we are not really worried about what's true anymore. We're just governed by what is perceived to be true. That's what social media has allowed to become the method of governance. It's no longer just this illusion of fiat currency. It's now also the illusion of information. Nobody's reading the books. Nobody's taking responsibility for their own understanding. And that's why our history is in danger of being lost, being erased. I think that there are people, patriots, that are trying to archive that history and make sure we don't miss it as we drive by. One of my favorites, of course, is my friend in Boston, Mark Kulak. He is traveling home today. Hopefully we'll get a live stream from him tomorrow. There's a lot of good work being done by the Liberty Perspective on Rumble. There you can see the link. There's also a lot of good work being done by the father of Grace, Grace's dad, deprogramming with Grace's dad on Rumble. And I also have a couple Substacks to recommend. One is from my friend in Germany. Mr. Alschner is on Substack as Never Again is now global. And also a friend of mine named Ned, who is an excellent artist and produces a lot of work lately that's just really great. I love it a lot. And so please, that might be one of the ways that you can bring people to share this. Oh, I wanted to do that. Wonder how many people remember this song. It is, yeah, wow, it's crazy. The beginning of March is really when all this really started. I had just done one bike ride, maybe two, and it's been a long time. They are still creating the illusion of consensus. I could change that, you know. I mean, it really is. They are creating the illusion of consensus. They are definitely creating it. And this has been a plan for a while, right? This has been a plan for a while. Before they had anything they could justify as the means and methodologies to do it, it's already been a plan. And that's why the message of some of these messengers has been the same. They are allowing a very lively debate within a spectrum which reinforces the presuppositions of the system. And that goes so far as to making very beautiful computer graphics which imply a level of fidelity of understanding that they don't have. That's what a lot of these computer-generated molecular cartoons do, is they make it seem like, oh wow, we really understand stuff, and that's just a spectacular commitment to lies, in the same way that it is that all of these people that were involved in creating the illusion of worst case scenario also just seem to ignore the fact that Sasha Latopova's daughter was on Alex Jones 3 times in 2019 and that she made videos about shooting the president. It's absurd to think that girl behind there is connected directly to our Health and Human Services Secretary. It's absolutely absurd to think that these two people down here in the corner are connected directly to our Health and Human Services Secretary. This guy over here that now comes up in this video is also connected directly to our Health and Human Services Secretary, and he's happy to announce the potential end of the West. But ladies and gentlemen, it's not the end of the West. You don't have to be sad about it. It's just a natural phenomenon. It's an eclipse that was coming, that these coordinated liars are inverting into something else, into a loss of sovereignty because of public health. It is no different than murder and an eclipse. This is a anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that Kevin McKernan is standing in front of. It is an anticipated rise. Listen carefully. It is an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality that Kevin McKernan is standing in front of and telling you it was a novel virus. Look at him right here. He's just committed, spectacularly committed. That's all it takes to tweet 1 year ago that no one cares about Scooby-Doo's definition of a pandemic. People got sick and it correlated with various molecular tests. Scooby is Barrick's boy, paving the way for further gain of function to be funded by your taxes and deployed on you. If this isn't the biggest admission that this show was actively curated by him and people, let's say, coordinated by him, that were queued up by him, even scripted by him, and Robert Malone and whoever else is involved. I'm not sure we know all the people who are involved, but I am sure that these people really, 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 really need us to teach this to our children. That's what they really need. I'm just going to play it again. It's one of the most embarrassing things he's ever said in a long time. It definitely is. And it's the crazy part is the internet doesn't forget. The emails are not ever going to disappear. The texts are never going to disappear. The videos are never going to disappear. And so we can justify a united non-compliance because of the nature of these people's own track record. We don't have to listen to them about bird flu. We don't have to listen to them about measles. It's not a thing. And I'm not telling you that measles is not a thing. I'm telling you that their stories are not a thing. Their drama is not a thing. Whatever smoke and mirrors they're making is probably based on some biology. But the bottom line is that all their smoke and fire and sparks and elaborate show was to make this picture possible, to make adults submit so that the kids' consent could be claimed. That's what it was about. That's why they don't want you to know the real history of the MMR shot in the UK and the role that Andrew Wakefield and Polly played in that. They don't want you to know that history. Otherwise, you might know that some of these people are responsible for them being brought to the United States and recycled to pull the same political scam that they pulled in the UK just a few years before. But I think this time could be different because I think these people are more exposed than they ever imagined they would be. I think a lot of these people thought that they were in a 2-year plan, a 2-year orchestration, a 2-year operation, and then they would be, able to go back to doing their own thing, whatever that was, fly fishing or surfing. But they're on year 6, and year 6 is not going to be fun, ladies and gentlemen. If I have anything to say about it, year 6 is not going to be fun for a lot of these people. At least I have hope that it's not going to be fun for them anymore, because it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be fun to cover up for murder. And the truth of this biology is coming. There's not going to be any avoiding it anymore. It was already coming before they probably dispensed with Brandy Vaughn. And now the big fish is going to eat the little fish, that's for sure. It's time to begin with the truth, ladies and gentlemen. We are starting with the truth at Gigaohm Biological, where intramuscular injection is probably dumb, where transfection in healthy people was definitely a crime, and where RNA cannot pandemic. Year 6, they thought it would be quick. Ha ha! I'm sorry, but the truth is catching up fast now, ladies and gentlemen. And before you know it, the U.S. vaccine schedule will be exposed as the criminal enterprise that it is. And even foreign governments that weren't aware of it will become aware of it. Hey, look at that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Cut. I get it? Yes. Hello, welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. My name is JJCouey. Let me test this quick. No, that didn't work. What was that?
I have no response.
No, that's not working. See, that's exactly what I was testing. It's not queuing up. I'm just going to click this out once quick and click this back in. Just pardon me for a second. It is March 4th, 2025. It is the 6th year of this pandemic theater. And you may be mistaken if you think that the pandemic theater is over, because there is a good chunk of American, active. That's the point here. So how can I start this show in a way that will try to give the same message in a different way? American politics and politics at the national level in a lot of these Western nations at this time is now based on what can be more seen as herding cats. Now, if you look at a country like the Netherlands, what you're going to see, let me just test this quick.
I have no response.
I don't know why it won't queue up. I don't know why it's not queuing up. That's so weird. Anyway, I guess I don't need a buzzer today. If you look at the Netherlands, one of the ways that their populace is fragmented is that they just have a lot of political parties. Germany does the same thing. And so these political parties can have one thing that they focus on, and that allows the populace to have a sufficient fractionization so that any sort of coming together at the top can be easily governed by the people who do the theater of coming together. Now, I think in the Netherlands, they must be aware that more or less this is what happens because of the way that they've been played, that now their former prime minister, who is just a scoundrel, is the head of NATO. It's just so hard for me to believe that a lot of these countries, even Germany, can be so bamboozled by this false reality that is only present on social media. And in America, we are not aware of, and I have only recently become aware of, the fact that the anti-vaccine movement in America has been hijacked as a political movement and turned into a sort of health, freedom, populist movement, not that dissimilar to what they did with the Tea Party or the whatever those people were called in 08, and what they do with the people on where they were camping out for Wall Street. These little political movements just need to be co-opted. And so they infiltrate, they get on the back of with planted nonprofit organizations in which there are saboteurs, and then you just kind of co-opt the whole movement. And so this is done quite regularly, and we have to understand, as Edward Bernays and Noam Chomsky and lots of other people would agree, historically this is how it's always been done. It's just that with social media, we, I think, need to be brought to understand how malevolent it can be done on social media. Because if in the 1980s, in order to control a guy like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you needed to own a television station and several of the people that worked there, and also the anchors, and everybody had to be in on it in order to fool Robert F. Kennedy Jr. into thinking that he was on a real talk show answering real questions and responding to real things, when in reality it was all a scripted thing that to make him look like this or look like that. That's how I imagine things would be done in the 80s, when you just had TV and radio and magazines. You had to move more stones around in order for people to go, hey, what's going on over here? On social media, because the stones are all imaginary, and because the stones on my phone can be rearranged separately from the stones on your phone, you can manipulate people in a way that was never possible before. And so I can scroll on my phone and imagine that I'm seeing an illusion of consensus that you cannot see by definition because you follow different people. And the illusion of consensus that you see is as compelling as the one that I see, even if it is the polar opposite of it. And you might think of this as being very, very mundane from the perspective of a sports team, where because I follow the Chicago Cubs, then I'm the one who gets all the Chicago Cubs stuff. And I think the whole world is always arguing about the Chicago Cubs. And somebody in St. Louis who likes the St. Louis Cardinals is thinking the exact same thing about the St. Louis Cardinals, except the St. Louis Cardinals are winning and the Cubs aren't. And so in some ways, one guy's more right than the other. But it's an illusion, right, that's created in our minds by the convenience of our choices and the algorithm and the personalized representation of reality. But if you start to understand that that exact same algorithmic precision can be applied to misleading you about things, and then more importantly, that the more compartments there are, i.e., the example being America or the Netherlands is a harder illusion to see through, because in the Netherlands, they still imagine that their multi-party thing is not infiltrated enough to essentially be fake. Whereas in America, a lot of people are willing to accept the idea that, well, I mean, they're both just parties of the corporate powers or the rich people or whatever. That's easier to believe. And so America, in a lot of ways, needs to have this overlaying media landscape so that people can be fragmented in a significant enough way so that they can still be controlled. And I think one of the best examples of this that's become very visible in the last 2 years is the use of the concept of health freedom, the concept of vaccine hesitancy, and the hijacking of it by our ruling powers, just like they hijack anything else. Hijack the opinions about what's happening in the Middle East, hijack the opinions about what's happening in Africa, hijack the opinions about what's happening with climate change, hijack the opinions about what's happening with the pole shift, and play games about all of that on social media, because again, each of our perception of reality, if we use social media, can be manipulated separately, independently, even though we are not using social media with that in mind. It's like if you looked out the window and assumed that everybody saw your backyard, that would be a really weird assumption, right? But what I'm suggesting to you is that your children and people that use social media skillfully are looking out their back window and assuming that everybody sees the same backyard. And that's not what social media does at all, okay? That's message one. I hope I didn't mean to beat that up there too badly. It is March 4th, 2025, and I'm just trying to, again, be repetitive as I possibly can with a message of hope that is not for everyone, but it is for anyone. And part of the heart of that message is we got to get off of regular social media. Now, it may not be that you choose to join our soapbox, but there's a lot of Mastodon servers. They're all federated. They're all separate. And so you can get your message out in lots of ways that has nothing to do with, and then you need to seek more and find more, but it will be sources that you trust and evaluate on a regular basis based on their behavior, rather than allowing some mechanism of randomness, which is not random, to provide thoughts that you entertain during the day. We must get our children off of social media. And the way to do that is to set the example of not being on it ourselves. We can't have it be a part of us unless it's a website that we ourselves create. That's really how I think it should be. It's more like MySpace in a way, but not really. You should never need to sign into anybody's website, that kind of thing. But we're not here to talk about that. But the message of hope starts there, because if you start interacting with the internet in that way, it will fundamentally change its effect on you. And a lot of us right now, I think, grossly underestimate how much of our day is ruined or wasted or polluted by our skillful use of social media. And that's myself included. It is for all the marbles. It's for the grandchildren of Earth. And that's why I say we have to get our kids off of social media by getting ourselves off of social media. maybe even reestablishing this idea that everybody should have their own website, because in the end, that's what you want. You really want that. And so encouraging people to have soapbox instances that they connect to ours, encouraging people to have PeerTube channels or PeerTube instances that they connect to ours and that we can mirror on theirs. This is how we strengthen our own network, so that what they have to do is delete us from these servers rather than, just simply make it so that only if your follower scrolls for an hour and a half do they finally see one of your posts, which is what it is right now. And so the concept that I want to get in today, which I'm not sure, did I set that up right? Let me just check this quick. That one is there. This one is not up, I bet. Let me just check these two things. The thing that I want to do today, and this might switch over something, but that's okay. I can fix that quick, is what I would like to do today is talk about how franchise players are riding the bench in this game, and what that really means to me. So first of all, you kind of have to know what a franchise player is, and that's going to switch that. Yes, I knew it would do that. And this one I want to be whoa, look who snuck up behind me. I'm going to go over here and then go here again. So a franchise player is a guy like Michael Jordan. A franchise player is like the guy who just got traded to the Lakers from the Mavericks. Luka Doncic. And the idea is that a franchise player is somebody that you build a team around. And one of the things to see with respect to how these organizations work is that when franchise players are found, they ride the bench. So one example might actually be Brian Hooker. Sorry, I was drawing a blank there. I could see his face. I couldn't say his name. Brian Hooker is a guy who's been at Children's Health Defense for a long time, is famous for a story about driving across the United States to take the testimony of someone from the CDC, and apparently knows that at least that data reveals that young black male children have an extra vulnerability to some vaccine schedule thing. I don't know what. But the point is that guy also has a book that they very rarely sell that only came out in 2023 called Vax Unvax. Now, keeping in mind that he probably worked for them for quite some time and that they also had this guy, Paul Thomas, it's just very strange how rather than coming out with a very strong message from the start, with some fundamental biology that maybe they heard from somebody like Brandy Vaughn or from Brian Hooker or from Polly Tommy, they are very consistently promoting other people because, again, franchise players ride the bench. And I think that it's really very simple. If you have somebody like Brandy Vaughn with the credentials that Brandy Vaughn has and the charisma on stage that Brandy Vaughn has and the razor sharp language that Brandy Vaughn has, then you don't stand in front of her and use other language and speak longer. You don't get in her way. You promote her. You say, I really like the way she says it because it is the way it should be said. If you don't believe that, then you get in front of her. If it's your job to make sure that people don't hear her, then you get in front of her and you say other things when somebody is saying it more cleverly than you. Imagine a scenario where you draft Michael Jordan, but then leave him on the bench. Only bring him in every once in a while for people to see, wow, that was a great dunk. Oh, never mind him. He's also good, but that's cool. Imagine that, because essentially that's what you have with Brandy Vaughn. That's what you have with unfortunately, somebody like me. I'm not trying to be overly focused on myself, but it's a story that I feel really rings true. I was hired by CHD and used for nothing public, used for nothing internal. no teaching of biology anywhere, no making of a curriculum anywhere, no making of a fact sheet anywhere. They used me in the most ridiculous way possible, behind the scenes, trying to put together a database of something from medical records. I mean, think about that. Think about how much they paid me, over $100,000 a year equivalent salary per month, which was like almost $8,000 a month, to do that and to be on a Zoom meeting a couple hours a week. It's an extraordinary, ridiculous scenario that I was in, where I was just absolutely breathless with the idea that, wait, really? This is all? We're going to have a meeting next week again? That's it? I have to figure out a database? And then I'm supposed to do what? That's really what they did with me and how much they paid me. And I am able to say that because I didn't sign the NDA that I was offered when I was fired. I think there are a lot of other people who probably can't talk because for whatever reason, they were not able to say no to an NDA. Maybe they were offered much more money than me. But this is really about the grandchildren of Earth. So at this point in time, there's no more punches pulled here. We're not going to stop talking about this because it is the American history that needs recording. Because somewhere in here, the legitimate objection to intramuscular injection was substituted for by a Andrew Wakefield recycled theater that had already been used to its fullest in the UK a few years before, and then restarted and recycled in America. And it has culminated with Andrew Wakefield currently being kind of a hero amongst this populist movement, at the top of which are people like Bannon and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I think they really wanted to be vice president and not Health and Human Services Secretary. That's the extraordinary place that we are right now. I hear a door opening, or I don't know if that's a door opening or what. Anyway. Okay, so I am being very serious when I say that franchise players ride the bench, because again, there's no explanation for why CHD was founded and then didn't use Brandy as like a chief scientific officer. I mean, what are we talking about here? What CHD goes from being the World Mercury Project in 2018 to Children's Health Defense, and then who did they hire? Mary Holland? Who's a whistleblower about a component of the MMR that hurt her kid years before? That she didn't really speak out about when it actually happened? I mean, what are we talking about here? How obvious can it be? ICANN was founded in 2016 after the making of the movie Vaxxed, and ICANN what? They just decided to ignore the language of Brandy? It's been a long, strange trip, ladies and gentlemen, because I've had to go through the same hard truths that Brandy probably had to learn, as she believed every one of these people was a hero and then found out otherwise, individual by individual betrayal. Individual by individual betrayal. And when I show this picture, I'm not proud. I think it's awful. I think I sometimes I'm just shocked that this is all I've got. All I've got at this point is my own experience to validate the fact that I'm taking up a fight that no one else apparently will take up. It's only my experience with Jay Bhattacharya and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Vera Sharav and Kevin McCairn and Pierre Corey and Ryan Cole and Robert Malone and Paul Alexander and Asim Malhotra, and it's only because of my experience with these people that I have the gumption to stand up for the idea that the United States vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise. And that I think even that guy was recruited specifically to sort of meddle with me. Otherwise, him being involved with the rest of these people makes no sense at all. And yet, like a month ago, he was on Steve Kirsch's podcast with the former research and development director of the Human Genome Project, Kevin McKernan. After all these years, they finally came together, no less on Steve Kirsch's own Vaccine Safety Research Foundation. You know why? Because the American vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise. And these people have been working for 5 years to make sure that America never comes to that conclusion until it's the right time to demolish her. That's what this is about. Until all the other aspects of American society and its system have been destroyed or discredited. And it makes me very sad because most of these people are unwitting participants. Most of these people have to be unwitting participants and just not aware of the fact that if you just look at the graph, you can see it's murder. There's no way to explain how we lost control of pneumonia the way that it shows in this bright red graph, except to show that there's no other explanation for this right here. This is a 2-year loss of control of something that can otherwise be controlled by antibiotics, because pneumonia is bacterial. Just like urinary tract infections are bacterial. But if people are treated as though they have a viral syndrome, and therefore antibiotics are inappropriate, which is something that somebody has said often, many people have said often in 2020 and 2021 during the time when this murder was going on, then the application of pure oxygen coupled with the idea that a viral syndrome cannot be treated by antibiotics could easily explain how we lost control. Nobody's ever going to talk about that, though, because these overclass people have placed highly trained acolytes in positions of influence using the military social control programs called social media, so that we ask the wrong questions and come to the wrong conclusions. And they made us figure out a mystery about a virus. And that's why all of these people are united in never telling you that PCR is actually a fraud as a diagnostic tool. That's because the background is so impossibly hot, there's no way to use it as a diagnostic tool. Not the way that it's employed in viral diagnostics. Pure oxygen causes ARDS. This is just something that any MD should be able to wake up to. And the idea that any MD listens to this video and doesn't pause it right here and go to PubMed and start reading and going, oh my gosh, well, we have to answer a question. How many people were given pure oxygen when they came to the hospital in 2020 and 2021? Because I've just found a whole pile of papers that shows that pure oxygen is really awful for people. And I didn't know that because I don't work in the ICU. There should be hundreds of doctors a day potentially coming to this realization with just a very simple critical thought going through their head. Wow, I don't know if he's right about that. And then they could go to the internet and find out that there are textbook chapters about this. And there are also videos of Pierre Corey. Videos of nightly news showing oxygen tanks being pushed from the ship Comfort that was brought to New York City. Why? Because it had an oxygen plant. And they were running out of oxygen, says Kyle Seidel. Says Nurse Erin. Not using antibiotics for the pneumonia that they themselves created is a crime. It's called murder. And that's why we have people who you can say it on the internet and no one's going to see it. I've said it correctly 1,000 times and everybody sees them. That's the way it will always be, because social media is their tool. It's not the town square. It's their tool. And these people have used it to create a new kind of governance. You know, they're taking some power away from the traditional sources of this power. The newspapers, the magazines, the network television. They're taking it away from them. And so you're seeing some friction and some resistance and some changing as people change alliances, as people realize that the power is shifting. And one of those characters is Elon Musk. He's just a character, but he represents something. You can use him as a landmark to see what's happening here, because his rise to power partially has to do with the influence that X can have, that Telegram can have, even if it's only a perceived level of influence. And this has all been accomplished by Team Worst Case Scenario. These are the people that stand in front of the real heroes, the real truth tellers, the real investigative reporters, the real journalists are all stood in front of by people who are pretending to be those people. Oh, I just happen to have a press pass to the White House and you just happen to not be able to get one. Oh, I just happen to have a lot of followers on Twitter and you just happen to not. I just happen to have 180,000 followers on YouTube. I'm still just as naughty as you are. And that's not how this works. The slavers make it feel like that because social media is their tool. And Team Worst Case Scenario is who I believe we need to blame for our own predicament. If you are following Alex Jones and you are following Brett Weinstein and you're following Chris Martenson or you're following Jordan Peterson or you're following some of these other people that are at the heads of these organizations, then you are enslaved because you're engaged in a limited spectrum of debate that reinforces all the presuppositions of the state. That's why today and yesterday, people have finally become kind of surprised that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not standing up to the measles vaccine after all. Yet Mary Holland was against the measles vaccine or some component of it since, I guess, 2015 when she was first on Democracy Now! Opposite Paul Offit. It's always been about measles for these people. That's why Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was featured in a Rolling Stone magazine and Salon magazine article all those years ago about measles. Because we are still in the show, even if it's been altered, even if it's been adjusted, the script has been adjusted, the script is still obvious. It's obvious that they make all of these ridiculous organizations full of saboteurs, funded saboteurs that can afford all the airfare in the hotels that Brandy never could, that Mark can't afford, that I can't afford, that a lot of these people can't afford. And that's why there are all these gatherings at all these places, all in the same weekends, because it's not about organizing a resistance useful in getting America's grandchildren free. It's about fragmenting a resistance to make sure that nothing actually happens. And it has been that way for a long time. And so this guy who declared the lab leak in January of 2020 is responsible. Just like this guy who is just connected to this for decades is responsible for creating the illusion of a health freedom movement. This guy who's connected by father to that guy's father, and they're both connected to the foundational forming of the FDA, he's not here by accident. These people all don't think of themselves as intellectual property experts by accident. They are there for some reason that is not in the best interest of our grandchildren in America. I'm sure of it. Other than that, this is a crime scene, and we have to see these people for who they are. They are traitors to America's grandkids. And they created and are creating ongoing the illusion of consensus by sticking to a limited spectrum of debate. At any moment in time, one of these people could stand up and say, how did it also all of a sudden become about the MMR shot. This is about something bigger, but they're not going to do that. And it's not political. It's because they are sabotaging our grandchildren's future. And there is evidence in their track record in the last 5 years, their behavior, their world travel, and the coinkydinks. You know, the happy little accidents of them all being in Romania and then months later all being in front of the Senate saying the same shit. It is the manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses being us. And if they have to, even people that are really, really fighting can be easily absorbed into this lively debate within that limited spectrum. Some of them wittingly, some of them unwittingly. And if those two ways don't work, then they just ignore you like they ignored Brandy and they ignore me. Now, I am not at the stage of courage where Brandy was, who put up billboards with her own money. And I'm trying very hard to find ways to get to the stage where maybe I could act like that. And action is what I think is necessary for us to make progress against this illusion. I think action is what is necessary in order for us to get past this illusion, where the better your message is, the less likely people will hear it. And the more that you point out that these people don't grow in their messaging, they don't progress in their messaging, they don't get sharper in their messaging, and the more you point out that they've been on the same wheel for so long, that the idea that in 2025 we're about to have a discussion about adjuvants is absurd. The idea that we're having a discussion about measles is absurd. It's almost like it was scripted to hide something else, you know, like an anticipated rise in expected deaths, like an eclipse, and used it to convince our grandchildren of something that never happened. So if you're not aware, Gigaohm Biological is supported only by viewers like you. I have no sponsors. I've got a couple very generous supporters. I'm going to switch over here really quick. Hey, little buddy, how are you? If you don't know who this is little Mike. He's now 6 months old. He's a good boy. He had an accident the last couple days, which is a little lame, but other than that, he's a good boy. He barks a lot. He's a good boy. We're very happy that he's such a sweetheart, but he's not as big as I want him yet. I think he's only about 50 pounds. I'm hoping for about 220 pounds. I don't know if we're going to get that. But he's a good boy. He's a good boy, huh? He's a good boy. You don't want to come up here and say hi? No? Okay. No? You don't want to come up here? I can't tell how big he is. He looks the same. Every time I get up in the morning, I'm like, dude, please grow. But anyway, thanks, Kira. I'll switch back over here. I think I can do this. No, that's not the right one. This one. Yes. So the timeline, I think, is always really important. I got to adjust this a little bit to make 2025 have a little more room now. I really think it is vital to keep repeating this, especially for college kids. I think as an older adult, I'm 53, I think it's harder for us to remember how little perspective we had as, let's say, a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old. And so a lot of these kids that we left in the lurch in 2020 and 2021 and just allowed them to go back to college and absorb whatever bullshit the college had to throw at them. Those kids don't have a really good perspective on what actually happened here, and the idea that all of these people could have been in place could have been put in place while they were in high school, so that when they got to college, all these people who were speaking out were actually just actors. It's a lot harder for a 20-year-old kid to see that than somebody who's 53. Never mind somebody who's 60, who I think at that stage, once you have that time horizon, you can start to see these patterns in a very different way. And since I have been seeing some, but not all of this behavior for a long time, when the pandemic hit, I was already not checked in, and I just joined Twitter because somebody told me to. Think about that. I was just on YouTube and somebody told me to join Twitter. So that's really the extent to which this whole narrative can be orchestrated. It's just a simple acquiescence to social media, and that's what a lot of these people also did. Convinced us that, on Twitter was where the truth is. And you can actually, if you don't have to do too much work, if you just take that group of people that I show you, and you take them and you look at what they were doing and what they were saying, you're going to find that it goes back years and years that people are put in place and part of this theater where they're determining what questions we're debating, and they're occupying this sort of extreme end of that or extreme end of this that we all accept the middle of. And so I've tried to give you lots of examples, not the more obvious one. This is an interesting...
So tell us what RFK...
What I'd like to try to do here, though, is really illustrate how I think spectacularly scripted this is. So what you have here is a very recent... it is a very recent TWIV episode for the Substack of Paul Offit. Remember, Paul Offit was on Democracy Now! With Mary Holland already in 2015, around the same year that Brandy was really gaining traction, starting to put her billboards up. And a couple years later, she would have billboards in like 8 states, like 30 billboards in 8 states. Anyway, what does he talk about on this podcast in February 2025? Remember, just to recall, I showed you this yesterday, but this is just to recall.
Junior doesn't believe in that explains a lot of his positions.
So what he holds...
But he won't. So tell us what RFK Jr. doesn't believe in that explains a lot of his positions.
So what he holds tightly to is the miasma theory. And you can read about this in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci.
No, he sells Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book as an example of the, let's say, chicanery of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that he believes in the miasma theory. Now, what I find interesting personally from my own experience in this timeline is that this debate about the germ theory and whether the germ theory is true or not was seeded as fundamental by a number of very conspicuous players early in my own story, including Kevin McCairn in Japan, who after 5 years found himself on the same stream as Kevin McKernan and Steve Kirsch, talking about amyloid like he was talking in 2020 when he said it was the worst case scenario and 1 billion people were going to die. And so what's more interesting is that not only was Kevin McCairn saying that discussion had to be headed off at the pass so that nobody was led down that false path, but he identified a number of players very early on as being really important in that game. The Baileys and Andrew Kaufman is the first guy that he ever mentioned. Now, interestingly, now in 2025, we have him, let's say, acknowledging that debate in some way or another. Even if he's acknowledging it and calling it silly, he is acknowledging that debate exists, that discussion exists, and that people have that discussion, even if it's a dumb discussion. He's acknowledging that it's happening. Okay?
Pages 285 to 288, which is titled...
And he even gives a citation for that, shows the book.
But let me tell you what he believes first. He believes in miasmas, which are sort of a Greek to loosely mean poisons.
And so now he's going to characterize it, probably mischaracterize it, and Bobby can say, I don't believe in miasmas. That's ridiculous. I never said that. I just explained it. But that's what we're going to see here as the theater. Now, let's move on. The reason why this I find especially revealing.
He wants to keep some of the tax cuts he had originally said. And what Bannon stands for, which breaks with Elon Musk.
Now, while this is happening, while Paul Offit says that it's crazy for people to have any doubt in the germ theory, even though this doubt and that debate was already seeded 5 years ago by a number of these meddlers specifically. And I mean Kevin McCairn, Paul Cottrell, Andrew Kaufman, Tom Cowan, who has a book with one of these companies 2 years before the pandemic, was conveniently part of this, again, limited spectrum of debate where nobody learned anything, nobody progressed in their engagement in noncompliance. They just ran in circles with FOIA requests and culturing and isolation and purification and did not make progress with, then they're murdering people. And that's extraordinary in hindsight. Now, what you see here is a 2025 video of The View where one of the members of that pseudo discussion, that fake discussion, that discussion between actors on a script, maybe they're improvising within a script, is acknowledging that Steve Bannon is a very interesting character, a patriotic character. And that I find, I'm going to turn this one. I find that to be very interesting because, again, like a hamster wheel, every few years the same characters come back and the same questions come back and the same debates come back with reinforced new adjusted narratives and a few more pieces of evidence. It is really like a hamster wheel. And so the guy who said it was a lab leak in 2020 is now back, and he's not going to talk about that anymore because he assumes that's already well decided. That's obvious. And these people are willing to talk about him as a relevant guy. And that is not by accident, ladies and gentlemen. That is a scripted mention of Steve Bannon.
Don't tax overtime. Don't tax Social Security. Give the money to the people that need it the most.
Who, Bannon says that?
Bannon.
Wow, that sounds like a lefty.
Why do you think I said I agree with Steve?
Wow, Bannon says that? Can we honestly say to our children that we believe that is a spontaneous conversation where Miss Midler is just coming to the realization that Bannon might not be a bad guy after all? Or is it possible that our governance is dependent on our belief that that's the case? That these women are just talking and their questions are relevant, their conclusions are relevant, and what they figure out is relevant. How they learn is how I learn.
I have no responsibility.
Darn it, it won't do it. That's really, that's what I'm sad about. That's what makes me the most sad, because that's what's incorrect about the way that this works. And what we have to pass on to our children is a knowledge that these people are not genuine, that their script exists, and that even their reference to other people is scripted on purpose to control the masses. And that's what's beautiful about it now. You can see that they are witting or unwitting, even if they just read, stick to the talking points on their little blue pieces of paper, they are unwitting participants in this show that people like Steve Bannon are orchestrating. Former Goldman Sachs employee, former Navy intelligence officer, former movie producer, guy who says he's going to make a movie about Epstein pretty soon. I mean, it's just absurd at this point that no one sees this except for Mark and me and the people watching our show.
Bannon, that rarely happens, but on this I do agree with them.
And so, of course, one of the other things that is revealed this week is that I probably was right, that, other people that told me these stories, it's true. I heard multiple stories from multiple people who I think are very credible, who have been on sets around the world during the pandemic, especially in 2020 and early 2021, where people were vaccinated before the vaccine was released to the public. And so I'm talking about secretly at Hollywood parties, people were vaccinated, and on set, people were vaccinated. You were basically forced to choose to take it if you wanted to keep working. And Hollywood did that. And a lot of Hollywood did it without really it becoming a big deal. And I do think that people probably died. People probably were injured. And one of them was my friend Annie Wershing. And I do know that I have one other source that I think is very, very, very much real, who was on a movie set in London, actually, who experienced the same kind of pressure to get vaccinated and the intense thing that Woody Harrelson is going to explain here in a second. Hey, what the hell? Why didn't that play? Cannot play media. Oh, sorry. Okay, I got to get out. And this one. It should have played right away. That's what was weird. Still not going to play.
Well, you know, I mean, I don't know how many sets you visited, but everybody was like, you know, in masks. And
Yeah.
and then there'd be different zones.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you get, well, the closer you get to the actual set where the shooting is, and then that red zone, people, put your mask on.
Now, understand what that does. That is just like whatever Ash or Milgram experiment or illusion of consensus. If everybody is induced, enticed, and coerced into performing the ritual, then everybody that encounters those people performing the ritual will be sucked into it. And it doesn't matter if the ritual is putting underwear on their head or wearing a mask. People will do that. That's what social animals do. And the pressure is incredible. That's why it feels so good to go to high school wearing clothes that you're comfortable in. Maybe even clothes that you know everybody thinks are cool. Or maybe it's even the best is to go on a day when everybody's wearing their jersey because there's a big game, and so everybody really fits in today. There's no possible way that anybody's going to be judging your shoes today because it's that kind of a day. That social pressure is very real. Anybody that's gone to an American high school understands that social pressure is very real, and it can be based on almost anything. In the early 90s, when I was in the late 80s, sorry, I graduated in 1990 from high school. In the late 80s, it was cool to have Guess jeans, but Guess jeans were freaking expensive, so I never had Guess jeans. But you can imagine, and I think anybody that grew up in a American high school like that, you can imagine how these little things matter. Having Air Jordans or not having Air Jordans can make you feel comfortable or not. But it's not a question of it's an imaginary social pressure that is created and alleviated all in our mind. That's why some of the coolest kids in your high school never cared about Guess jeans or Michael Jordan's shoes. And that's the magic of this, is that if you start to see that in a healthcare setting, it really only takes the CEO and the head of operations and the head of your department to insist that you follow protocol. And if you want to keep your job, you're going to do it. And then by keeping your job and doing it, you are part of an illusion of consensus that all of the medical students that work under your faculty will see as an illusion of consensus that, well, who am I to question all these guys? And the same thing happens at every school board meeting and at every council meeting. And it's the unwitting participation of people who are not engaged in critical thought that make it so powerful. And so all the people on a movie set that just want to make it, that just dream of being an actor, that just go along because they'll do anything, are the same people that create the illusion of consensus with only a few witting participants being required.
And I was just like, I never bought it.
And so all these things
The
are very
death of
safe
the
to
germ
say.
theory. Former rock musician and
The death of the germ theory. So here's a video from early 2021 with Sasha Stone, who you can Google your way to understand why it's so weird that this guy is hosting this meeting and who's in this meeting and what gets said in it. I'm just going to let this roll.
artist Sasha Stone grew up in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, during the War of Independence. He is an activist, speaker, publisher, author, and filmmaker. Stone has initiated peace initiatives and...
Okay, so Ancient Relic 32 has just made a statement in the chat that, in my mind, is almost kind of frightening. There was only like a year and a half where people were safety pinning the rolled up pants, because you can tight roll them. If you have long enough pants, you can tight roll them and you don't need a safety pin. And it was really this time when actually there was a time when people actually also just pinned them at the bottom. It's nuts. Wow, what a nice mention. That's cute.
Educational programs, stood up against human rights abuses in various parts of the world, and continues to stand out for the protection of pioneering innovators, scientists, and doctors. In an online video conference in early 2021, he talks with Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Carrie Madej, Dr. Lawrence Palevsky, Dr. Tom Cohen, and Dr. Andrew Kaufman about the issue, the death of the germ theory.
I am fairly sure that woman Northrup was just on Steve Kirsch's podcast the other day, but I'd have to look.
I think we as clinicians need to go back to our roots. And when I was training in medical school and residency in the 80s and 90s, the pediatricians who were training us had been practicing pediatric medicine in New York City since the 1940s. And they would say something very interesting. They would say that when children in their practice would have their childhood illnesses, their measles, mumps, chickenpox, rubella, flu illnesses, fevers, colds, coughs, runny noses, if we let them be, they would actually have a developmental growth spurt after the illness was over.
Yeah.
And so we forgot that after the 1990s, when we started to say that every disease needs to be wiped out. Every disease is an infection that needs either antibiotics or antivirals, and every disease needs to be stopped with vaccines. And so somewhere in the 1990s, I heard the term that the body has the innate capacity to heal. And Western medicine has no concept of that at all. And I searched for it. The chiropractors talked about it. The homeopaths talked about it. Acupuncturists, Ayurvedic specialists, all of the what we call alternative practitioners clearly understood that the body had the innate capacity to heal. If we go into the science of the body, if we look at the immune system, if we look at the autonomic nervous system, we look at the lung system, the heart system, the kidney system, the gastrointestinal system, the dermatology system, if we look at every system, we can understand in the basic science of the body that the body works to heal itself if given the right tools. And so over the last 20 plus years, I have been practicing that an acute illness in children is actually not a cause of a problem. It's actually the resolution to a problem. And that stress and toxicity and poor diets and poor sleep and injections with poisons and inappropriate or unfortunate emotional environments, all of these things will increase stress in the body, and that will create increased waste. And the body just has so much capacity to get rid of waste until it has to explode. And that explosion, Sasha, is the acute illness. And the acute illness is actually the resolution of stress. It's the resolution of problem. So we need to start practicing that children getting sick is actually a way for them to resolve stress, to clear out waste, to get rid of toxins, to utilize the bacteria, the viruses, the protozoa, the amoeba, the parasites that are in their bodies that are capable of assisting in the expelling and the extermination of waste and toxins. And then what we see is pruning of the nervous system, pruning of the immune system, advancement of the human ecosystem, and a stronger, more vital, and more developed child into their adulthood.
If you look at where this video roughly is placed relative to the murder, it's very curious at this point in time to be so, I don't know, it doesn't seem very precise to me. It doesn't really have a very good message in light of the amount of murder that's gone on for the last year and a half. The amount of, regular PCR testing that's going on, the regular acknowledgement of the ritual, and instead we're actually talking about infection being an inflection point where afterward we go through a growth spurt. So we're not really questioning anything here. Just keep that in mind. He's not questioning anything with regard to pathogens doing anything. You get infected.
So the only way, I feel, is for us to change institutions, is for us to change it on the ground. And that is to start teaching parents and teaching other practitioners how to reduce wastes coming into the body, how to fix an emotional environment, how to understand children's needs on a spiritual level, how to feed them correctly on body, mind, and spirit, and how to maximize their potential rather than suppress everything that we do in society. We suppress their emotions, we suppress their symptoms, we suppress everything because we don't like discomfort. And I think on the ground, we can do it. And the institutions won't change. They'll just dissolve.
Absolutely. I'd love to introduce that. And I think this is a really, really key time that we're in because we're on the verge of a major paradigm shift in healthcare and in true healing. And that's what we're really talking about. Germ theory is the theory that's been around for over 100 years and has been the main model for disease throughout our Western healthcare system. And essentially what it proposes is that there are these microscopic organisms that exist all around us, and they have evil intent to come into our bodies and attack us and cause disease. And our medical model of providing pharmaceutical drugs and being dependent on professionals is really based around this theory.
Now remember, what's really interesting is that Kevin McCairn was very adamant in the 5 consecutive weekend streams that I did with him and Paul Cottrell and Addie Ads, all associates of Mr. George Webb, in the beginning of 2020, were adamant that this guy, Andy Kaufman, was the bad guy of all bad guys on the no virus team that had to be opposed. This guy who was doing prison biometrics with Andrew Cuomo before the pandemic. It's just the truth. This guy.
But when you go and look for the primary evidence to actually show that this is true, what you find is that it's full of fault and fraud, and that there's really no scientific basis. And terrain theory is the other theory that was discovered only shortly after germ theory was proposed.
Thank you. Terrain theory wasn't discovered, and it is proposed. Theories are proposed, theories are tested, hypotheses probably, because theories need a little more evidence than a hypothesis does. But okay, go ahead. I'm being nitpicky here.
By some very rigorous scientists like Antoine Béchamp and Gunther Enderlein. And essentially, it's familiar to everyone already because when you talk about the gut microbiome or the microbiome or the gut bacteria, what you're really talking about is terrain theory, which says that the microorganisms actually function in a way that they do out in nature, where they break down dead and dying tissue and debris and remove it, and that they're actually an integral part of our healing process, and that they're not the cause of disease, but actually part of our response to it. And, you know, we all know that health fails when our bacteria that live in our body are not healthy. And that those...
And so that's him obfuscating the truth here, right? He's kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth. If he says that germ theory is based on the fact that there are these little organisms that are out to get us, when in reality, it is a fine line between that reality and the truth. Because if our gut is leaky, then the proteins and toxins and waste and whatever that is produced by this bacterial symbiotic ecosystem in our gut is not well controlled in its ability to reach our insides and our blood and our circulation, then it can cause all kinds of problems. And so this is incredibly disingenuous, with a level of sort of arrogance and certainty that hides it. And it's very, very, very skillfully done. And that's why I think he's probably part of it, because that's why all of them agree to mention him. And then when you go to him, you find somebody who is malevolently persuasive in his obfuscation. But if you know the biology, then you can hear it plainly for what it is, because he keeps talking out of both sides of his mouth.
Cells outnumber our own cells by some estimates 10 to 1. So terrain theory is really talking about a natural integration of all the organisms into an ecosystem within our own bodies that works in a collaborative manner to restore and bring about lasting health.
So essentially, everything we think we know about germs is essentially
Look
defunct.
at that smile.
What role did Louis Pasteur play in the germ fiction?
Well, Louis Pasteur was a central figure, and what he did was really copy some scientific experiments done by others, such as Antoine Béchamp and Claude Bernard, but sensationalize them in such a way to appeal to the French royalty and aristocracy. And he became their, favorite prodigal son. And that's why they called upon him to solve problems with silkworm diseases and things like that. And he rose to prominence. But we know later from uncovering his diaries and such that much of the science that he did was actually fraudulent and misleading. He was really about self-promotion. But the medical establishment that was being formed at the turn of the century with respect to influence of the Rockefeller system really seized upon that model. And
what are his eyes scanning there? Because he's not just talking, right? He's scanning either a talking point list or an outline. It's obvious.
And it, helped him rise to prominence such that we all know his name, right? Because we know about pasteurization, for example, which is named after him.
I started to study on my own, and it worked. People got better. And I ultimately found that the causes of disease were really toxins or lack of nutrients or lack of your building blocks. And that any infection, anybody could get over. I didn't see any infection that was that powerful that could overcome anybody. I found them more opportunistic because the body was imbalanced. The body was weakened by something. And so my job was to educate and help the person find out what those blockages were, what happened, whether it's emotional or physical.
And so now imagine how many of these people need to be in on it for the other three to go along, to get a private call beforehand saying, this is what we're going to cover. Can you contribute something? How many of them need to be in on it? Just Dr. Carey and Dr. Andrew Kaufman and Dr. Tom Cowan? Maybe. But the more that are in on it, the scarier it is, because these people then spread out over time because of this, right? And because of the podcasts they go on, and they keep spreading around. And then a few years later, they'll come back together again. Then they'll spread around again. And that's how it works. As long as 2 or 3 of these people are in any given group, it's always... I don't know why that's not working. It's really strange. Let me see for a second if I can fix that. I need that file here, right there. No? Oh, no. I want it right. No. Doggone it. There. There we go. Okay, so let's get going.
Physical and environmental. And I still believe in that to this day. That's the terrain theory. And one thing to know, everybody should know this fact. Bacteria and other infections, people think of infections, other organisms, they're very, very important. Because the human body, our genome is one of the smallest genomes of all the animals on the planet. But we have the most genes of just about any animal on the planet.
What an interesting thing for her to be talking about so precisely, while at the same time just a few seconds ago was saying some nonsense that didn't seem very precise at all. So much so that I feel like we've got to go back a little bit.
Well,
on him to solve Feller system
found that the
rise to prominence such
Listen
that we
to
all
this.
know his name, right? Because we know about pasteurization, for example, which is named after him.
I started to study on my own, and it worked. People got better. And I ultimately found that the causes of disease were really toxins or lack of nutrients or lack of your building blocks. And that
Lack of your
any
building
infection
blocks?
anybody could get over. I didn't see any infection that was that powerful that could overcome anybody. I found them more opportunistic because the body was imbalanced. The body was
It's such an imprecise discussion, and then suddenly she's going to switch to tell you all about genes.
weakened by something. And so my job was to educate and help the person find out what those blockages were, what happened, whether it's emotional or physical, environmental. And I still believe in that to this day. That's the terrain theory. And one thing to know, everybody should know this fact. Bacteria and other infections, people think of infections, other organisms, they're very, very important. Because the human body, our genome is one of the smallest genomes of all the animals on the planet. But we have the most genes of just about any animal on the planet. So how is that possible? Well, the genes come from the bacteria and other organisms that are in us and on us. We need them. We need them desperately, or we would die. So they're not bad. We need them. We are in a symbiosis with everything around us and inside of us, teeming, right? So you can't sanitize everything. You're killing the good stuff too. You're killing the things that make you healthy.
And so it's good, right? Some of this is real, some of it is nonsense. And that's what makes it so frustrating to listen to the certainty of these people and look at their smug smile after a year and a half of murder.
You have to understand who we are and what science truly is. We've been taught the wrong science, and we're teaching our med students the wrong science now.
It's a script. Can you not hear it? It is a script. She's too happy about this. If she really believes some of the things that she's purporting to believe, then she would be very unhappy. Because she would be very sad for America's grandkids.
You have to understand those points. So I hope that we can see a revolution now in medicine, and we bring back true science and start teaching people and others about educating them how to be healthy.
And that viruses are not pathogens. They are genetic debris that comes from the...
Is he really on camera and also talking into a phone? That is fabulous.
...breakdown of the cells and tissues. And I actually once heard Sherry say this in a wonderful way. The reason we get sick is we don't have enough of the good stuff, and we have too much of the bad stuff. So you put bad stuff in you, and then you break down, and the little garbage, the little pieces of paper, some of them with Dostoevsky's name on them, we call those viruses when they're nothing of the sort of pathogenic viruses. So our next step in this process, because everything everybody's saying is absolutely correct, there is no, quote, vaccine here. There's just a toxic mechanism of harm. And it all comes back to something which people sometimes say.
And so we're arguing about the vaccine right now, but not really, because he could call it transfection. I had already been calling it transfection for almost a year. It's weird. And you hear it now, and you see how late they are. There's already a year and a half of murder here where an MD like Tom Cowan could have spoke up about the absolutely irresponsible use of ventilators, the irresponsible omission of antibiotics, the irresponsible willy-nilly use of supplementary oxygen in response to a dime store Amazon-bought pulse oximeter. They could have been already, as MDs, getting mad about the fact that the FLCCC is sending people to the hospital if they have a 94 or less % pulse ox while they're wearing N95 masks. But none of these people are going to speak to that now. None of these people are going to stop the murder. They're going to run out the clock. He's barely even got Zoom figured out. He's got to use a phone at the same time that he's on camera. If you can't see how malevolent it is that these people are together in 2021 while people are being murdered, and they're not talking about the murder, but instead barely addressing the new vaccine out there. No one has said that intramuscular injection in general is dumb. He's implying that there might be a combination of things they could inject which is good, but in this case, that's a combination of toxic stuff.
So, Tom and Andy, why are you harping on this, that there's no virus? The reason is because once we really see the facts and the science, they can't do this to us again. They've been doing this to us with measles and AIDS and, Ebola.
AIDS is the same as Ebola is the same as measles. And there's the danger, right? There's the danger. Because a lot of what this is happening here could easily be the mislabeling of, the over-labeling of. Imagine a scenario where anything that a gay man caught was HIV. Imagine the ever expanding list of possible symptomologies or manifestations of HIV. Because if you go through that history, you will see that it starts with a small list, and by the end, there are a lot of things that only can happen in women, like uterine cancer can be connected to HIV. And the only way to test if anybody is HIV positive for many, 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 many years was the presence of antibodies. Ladies and gentlemen, the imprecision of the retelling, the imprecision of the objection, the imprecision of the language chosen by these people is not by accident in 2021. It is by design, by script, and at least half of these people know that they are following a script. They're happy to do it.
And Zika over and over again, because the entire world, including the scientific community and the medical doctors, unfortunately are illiterate, essentially, about the science of viruses. As actually was I, until I opened my big mouth and Andy said, you got to look at this a little more. And so I've known about HIV and AIDS for 30 years. Anybody who honestly looks at the science will come to the...
I'm sorry, but I'm going to make a statement right here that might seem pretty bold, but I don't think it is. That's got to be a lie. And do you know why I think it's a lie? Because if you actually knew the story of AIDS before the pandemic, then you're nothing but a scoundrel and a failure. If you knew the story of AIDS for almost 30 years and you only wrote this book in 2018 and it's this big and it doesn't say that intramuscular injection is dumb, then you're just a scoundrel, Tom Cowan. You're a fake scoundrel. Because if you've known that AIDS was fake for 30 years, yet at the start of the pandemic you had a book, and in 2025 you still can't say that RNA cannot pandemic. You still can't say that it was murder, and that's how they convinced us that something was happening here. You can't say it as an American, you're a traitor. And I think this video reveals him as a traitor if he says that he thought that AIDS was fake for 30 years. I didn't. I didn't think it was fake. I didn't learn that AIDS was fake until after I realized that I was bamboozled by the vaccine schedule, and my doctor was too, and that I failed to protect my daughter. These people who claim to have known for this long but have gotten nowhere and gotten the message nowhere and have no billboards that say it are traitors to our grandchildren. And the smiles on their face as they tell us reveals them. I can't do this with a smile.
Conclusion that they haven't isolated pathogenic viruses. Viruses aren't pathogens. There's a whole nother mechanism, as Sherry said, why we get sick. We get poisoned. We have too much bad stuff, not enough good stuff. And that's kind of all there is to it. And let's all move on and build a better life, because we don't need to keep focusing on viruses, because there's nothing there.
So after all that shit, he still didn't say we should stop injecting our kids. Do you see it yet?
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Randy, you want to add anything?
Even the laughter is an illusion of consensus. It's like a laugh track in Seinfeld. Without it, it doesn't hit. So these people know that. These people know that game. Intelligence people would know that game. And so if there are people that are playing along here, some of them are laughing along because they're unwitting, and that's what people do when they don't get the joke. Other people are laughing to make sure that the spell is successfully cast.
Well, I want to add that it's really hard to follow Tom because he said everything in such a great way. But I do have a few other things to offer. And one is just to back up what has been said in terms of the word germ itself. That the real meaning of the germ is a new growth.
So is anybody else seeing him as kind of the leader here, the little coordinator, the little curator of the whole debate? And Tom Cowan is just kind of following along, learning how it goes. Maybe Dr. Sherry Tenpenny is also just not aware of the fact that everybody is ignoring Brandy Vaughn's message. Even though Brandy Vaughn died like 2 months before this. It's February 2021. Think about that. Brandy Vaughn died 2 months before this video was made.
New life, budding out. And when we conflate that term to mean some agent of disease, we're really actually turning it completely upside down. And so to understand that germ really means life, and that we need those germs for our lives. I just want to add a little bit, and this is not for fear-mongering purposes, but just kind of as to shed some light on what I think is the real intent of this, quote-unquote vaccine technology. And of course, I agree with everyone that it's...
What is the intent of the technology? Are you ready to hear this? Holy cow.
It's not a vaccine in any traditional sense, but I would say that it's closest to being a gene therapy. And what I think that this actually heralds is a new era of virus discovery and vaccine development that is going to be extremely accelerated compared to the past paradigm. So
But what is virus discovery if it's fake then? And so what are these people doing other than confusing the people that are listening? They are not at all consistent. Tom Cowan just said, forget it all. It's all nonsense. But he's saying that this is a long-term plan. They're going to discover more viruses and have more vaccines. What is this?
Past, we had vaccines being manufactured from essentially toxic cell cultures. The same kind of procedure that they use to in their quote, virus isolation.
See how bad it is? Is that in 2021, these guys already had a year to figure out that what they actually do, it's not just a toxic cell culture. It's actually transfection of a cell culture by a pure DNA or RNA. And then whatever happens is what they call virology. And you could say that. And you could say that these vaccines are really just transfections too, because it's all just one big bullshit methodology that we've been using on the bench for a long time. It's just become really cheap. But they don't say it because it's not their job. They're not trying to save our grandchildren. They are running out the clock. They have to run the clock out on this murder that's going to go on for another year yet.
Which is not isolation. But now we're entering an era where they're more and more claiming that just because they can piece together millions of fragments of RNA of unknown origin into a computer model of a genome, that they're going to exploit that and use this gene therapy platform going forward with every time that they pretend to discover a new virus. And the reason that this is so easy and the reason that they were able to get this product to market so much faster than has ever been done before is because they had the platform already designed and ready to go.
No, it's because they already made protein-based biologics, and making mRNA is stopping short of that, minus the very expensive purification process. That's why. Because they already had all the materials and all of the infrastructure necessary to make huge quantities of DNA that could be converted using commercial enzymes to huge quantities of RNA. Because that's steps involved in making any protein biologic, the most expensive kind of pharmaceutical product. And if you don't have to do the most expensive part of the most expensive part of the most expensive pharmaceutical product, and you don't have to do and pass the purity test of the most expensive pharmaceutical product, but you can still use all of the apparatuses that you already have to make the DNA and the RNA precursors to that most expensive product, instead market this as a vaccine. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And these people were unable to explain that to you. MD, 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 PhD, MD, MD, PhD 21. And if they would have had me on, I would have explained it already. The first time I explained it was in my own podcast in July of 2020.
And of course, if you look at Moderna, they have tried to get this platform approved to treat cancer and such, but they've never actually had a product on the market before. Yet they are swimming in cash. But with this platform, all you have to do, because what it is it's basically like a synthetic exosome made out of some kind of lipid membrane.
Why not just call it a transfection, you traitor?
That easily...
There's a product called lipofectamine. It's exactly the same thing. It's just a joke to me at this point. These people are masquerading as patriots and dissidents, and they were all along playing a theater of titration where they slowly rolled us to the inflection point where the murder would end and everybody would say, oh, the COVID shots are obviously bad. I always said it.
Goes into our cells, and it delivers a gene that we don't know what it is, as Tom pointed out, right? They say it's a spike protein, but it could really be anything.
True.
But there's a vehicle, a plasmid, or in another tech.
My goodness, it could also be just placebo, couldn't it be? But if you said that, then it would be easy to dismiss the lack of injuries. It's amazing, isn't it?
Technology is from an adenovirus, and it basically just delivers that gene to our cells. So if they discover or pretend to discover a new virus and have a new gene sequence of an important protein, they can just pop that right into the platform in hours.
Oh, and so he's selling it for him too. Interesting. That's exactly the argument they make.
Like in hours, as long as it takes to synthesize that piece of mRNA on their RNA synthesizer machine, they can pop it in and then boom, have a new product for.
I'm sorry, they're not doing that. You see the problem there? They're not using RNA synthesis machines for making the huge batches. They used recombinant genetics and bacterial cultures to do it. And so again, here we have imprecision that amounts to obfuscation of the truth, that it is murder that was used to coerce people into accepting transfection as a vaccine. And these people aren't helping anybody understand that. It's real simple, Tom, but for some reason these jackasses can't say it.
For any new vaccine. And I think that this is really the plan, that there's going to be
Oh,
first
2 cups.
mutations
Damn,
of,
that's fire.
SARS-CoV-2
Fire.
that are faked, that they'll make new gene therapies for, and then maybe they'll introduce other viruses. And that each time they have an opportunity to influence our genetics and also claim property rights over us, because these sequences are patented and then they're part of our body.
Oh, so now it's about patenting people and changing them. And so again, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's one of those limited spectrums of debate that sure makes it seem like the overclass has got all the cards, doesn't it? We're screwed going one way and the other way. All powerful leaders.
So there are all sorts of implications if you allow this technology to go further forward, and if you participate in this. And we're talking about, for the individual, as has been pointed out, this is a time that we need to resume individual responsibility over ourselves, our families, and our domain. And if we decide, and we always have the power to decide, okay, no one is holding us down at gunpoint, at least at the present moment, to make these decisions. But if we decide to take an experimental genetic treatment for a viral illness that doesn't exist, then, and we have the potential of modifying our own identity as humans as a result, then it would be obviously quite foolish and very much against our interest. So, not to end on such a downer, I want to just say that I am just so pleased and just really tickled to be part of this amazing group, and to see that such a group of physicians has come together to announce that we want to help.
I would argue that it's very specifically, he pitched for the idea that RNA printing would work, which is also what Vincent Rancaniello seeded in these years. The gist of it is that Vincent Rancaniello said that it's just crazy to think, right, that they're making, like, when we are working on our bench, we work with nanograms of RNA, and they're now making kilograms of RNA. Isn't that nuts? It's mind-blowing. And so the idea is that this isn't going to work. That's why there's been an immunologist on Jay Bhattacharya's podcast. That's why these guys are talking about RNA printing, because remember, the problem is that when you use the DNA construct in a bacterial culture and then use a commercial RNA polymerase to change that to RNA, it's an impure RNA. It's got all kinds of impurities from this process and that process, but also from the imperfect nature of the translation from DNA to RNA, yada, 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 all these shortcomings. And so they're going to tell us that that's one of the many shortcomings. We were very naive. Actually, what we should have done is first looked at your immune system, looked at your own genetic background, and then sculpted the vaccine just for you. That's where this is going to be in 10 years or 15 years, when they have bamboozled our children into accepting it, if we are unsuccessful at freeing them. And these people are seeding that narrative, just like Robert Malone did and lots of other people did, by hinting at the fact that they can print RNA. He said that they just can print it right now and then they can just put it in their platform. Yeah, in theory, they can. But they're not using that technology to produce any of the billion batches that are going out. They can't. And he might not be sophisticated enough to know it, but his script put that in there, not me. And that's not by accident. It's there because that's going to be one of the future fixes, because they are going to use RNA printing and its ever decreasing cost to design a vaccine just for you and your family. Produce it on need, maybe. Maybe they'll just have an RNA printer in every doctor's office, and they'll just make the vaccine right there on the spot. Safe as sugar.
Usher in a new era of true healing, where we look at the truth about biology and medicine, and we promote personal responsibility and we empower people. It's just an amazing opportunity. So
I don't want to promote personal responsibility. I want to stop the vaccine schedule, because intramuscular injection is dumb. It is not medicine, and I think it is responsible for almost all of the damage that we see around us in the less than optimal health of our children and ourselves. because ingestion is very different than injection. And the more times you've allowed somebody to trick you into taking an injection, the more likely it is that whatever's not optimum about you can be traced back to that. Of course, it would be great if you were eating better. Of course, it would be great if all of us were triathletes. Of course, it would be great if we had a lifelong track record of being active, but none of us do. But we do have a lifelong record of taking injections when we're told. And the youngest among us have taken the most. And that is a frightening place to be right now, where they have taken this population pyramid and made it even worse, almost like they chopped the bottom right out of it. Because not only do we have a non-replacement population of young people, but that young people is going to be more, probably more unhealthy than any generation America's ever seen by orders of magnitude.
So my gratitude, I want to extend to all of you.
We're delighted to have you with us, Andy and Tom. Hope you will join us for our weekly mastermind. I do want to do another plug for the Clubhouse app that we're exploring. Not that I'm promoting that, because we are working on our own private platform that will be encrypted and not with some of the connections that we have. So that's a kind of a precursor, but I think these...
DMSO is something that when you work with it on the lab, you have to use gloves to use it. I don't understand how people are taking DMSO. I don't get it. I don't understand why people are taking methylene blue either. I don't understand the ivermectin craze, except for the way that I understand it is that people get tricked into doing it if they see enough people on social media that say ivermectin works, if they read enough books that say ivermectin works, if they see enough books on sale that say ivermectin works, if they see enough ads on Rumble that says ivermectin works, maybe then they get it. I don't know. It's got to be that. What else can it possibly be other than people just making the wrong decisions based on the wrong information provided by bad people? I really see it that way, ladies and gentlemen. I see it that way. There's no explanation for why Kevin McCairn, who predicted 1 billion dead, who said this was worst case scenario, and never says murder in America, has never said the opioid crisis, makes fun of me and Mark Kulak with a thumbnail at least every week for the last 5 years. Just recently on a podcast with Steve Kirsch and Kevin McKernan talking about amyloids, a thing he obviously knows nothing about other than whatever was given to him to read. And pushing prions, of course. This guy told me 5 years ago in 5 consecutive streams that dude was a bad guy, that this chick was awful, and made memes about this guy and memes about that guy and memes about these people. And these people have never come back to him. In fact, Mark Bailey had a very astute conversation with him in 2022 about exactly what, curiously enough, Paul Offit says that Robert F. Kennedy believes, and that all of those people thought was worth debating all the way back then. It's a hamster wheel with rungs that you can start to recognize, and as they come back, you can start to predict the ones that are going to come again. And none of the rungs on this wheel are intramuscular injection is dumb, RNA cannot pandemic, or this was always transfection and thus criminal. None of it. None, no, none. The pandemic based on a false narrative of the population pyramids, it's never going to come up on this hamster wheel of these people. You know, even if they could all win right now by just pointing out that, you know what they did? They knew all these people were going to die, and they swept them together a little bit and then told us a story about the fake viruses because viruses are fake. These guys could actually say that. You realize that, right? They could make all their arguments about why there are no viruses, and then they could edify that argument by saying there's a real easy biological explanation for what happened. In the West, the population pyramids predicted this. We knew this was coming. And we told our kids a story about it being something else other than what it was, especially with regard to how we murdered people. So you can't absolve these people from their performances, because those same people also completely ignore Jessica Rose, a person with orders of magnitude more influence on more cats than I will ever have contact with. And yet these people agreed to lambast me and attack my family and prevent my family from thriving. The same way that Jessica Rose, after a couple years of telling me how smart I was and how great I was and how amazing my presentations are, goes on to ignore me. It's the same way that Jessica Hockett did it, the same way that Nick Hudson does it, the same way that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current Health and Human Services Secretary, apparently has been advised to do it. The unfortunate mistake is that I was able to hang on long enough to get my name in this book. And forever after, it's going to be a pain in the ass because I'm not shutting up.
JJ,
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
are you going to do the CD and?
So she used to just love me and used to just think I was brilliant, and these people ignore her, attacked me, and now she ignores me and hangs around with, Kirsch and Weinstein and all these people that she's been touring with for the last 6 years. And so that's her role, to make you feel heard in a Zoom meeting, make you feel heard in a Rumble video that no one will ever see and she will never share. And in the meantime, she's going to go testify in front of the Canadian NCI about VAERS 5 years later, just like Epigirl's script required. Nobody is in this narrative by chance. That's why we see that at the start of the pandemic, at the same church that this lady is at, is also Judy Mikovits, is also Robert Malone, is also, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And so it's all one big show. And so she's like a friendly opposition to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the sense that she agrees with her 180,000 followers on YouTube that he's somebody to talk about, that he's somebody that might save us or might not. Maybe he's somebody that needs persuading. And this lady is just an unwitting participant who has a very lucrative Substack, and so she just goes along with it because, it's killing, right? It's great to be part of their little show. I don't know who this guy is, but he was recruited in the last year or so. Some epidemiologist named Nick Hustler. Almost. And so that's also what we have here going on with the Weinsteins and with that guy, Sam Cedar, and this person. They're just being put in place to have the discussions that they're supposed to have and test their SAG acting skills with their reactions. No way. And that's how they did it. They fooled us into solving this mystery by acting this out on podcasts and on TV and on Tucker Carlson and on Bill Maher. And it's all one malevolent show. And that's the reason why my understanding progresses so quickly in that 5 years, progresses during the murder, and all of their timelines do not progress at all. Their timelines could have started here in 2019, where Brandy Vaughn, a franchise player, was already able to say it better than all of them. And the CHD could have recruited her as a spokesperson, could have recruited her and promoted her as a hero. But instead, they stood in front of her and collected money that would have otherwise gone to her, just like that guy Larry Cook did with his still existent campaign, StopMandatoryVaccinations.com. Some of these slime balls even slept with people in order to absorb them. It's a very gross place that we're in right now, where these people have been ignoring Brandy for so long. 2016 is when she first said it right on a billboard. 2016 is when she first said it right on a billboard. And these people have been ignoring this franchise player ever since. Michael Jordan on the bench. Let's put other people in. Luke Longley can play. We can have some clown like this say it's a combination of genetic and environmental causes and I don't want to single anybody out or blame it on the parents' genetics. We can have this guy say that he has a reduced schedule or a graduated schedule, or we'll just give it a little later because vaccines are great, kinda, right? I don't have a firm stance on that at all, even though that's what you should have a firm stance on to begin with. And this lady believes that it's just glyphosate. It's for sure glyphosate. It has nothing to do with the idea that injection is so much more dangerous than ingestion. It's actually glyphosate, and she actually says that in 2017. And so Polly Tommy says it correct.
Well, make no mistake that the other side, without a doubt, do not want the public, the people, the parents, to hear the stories of the unvaccinated. They want us to talk about MMR, autism, Andrew Wakefield. They want that to go down the...
Now remember, Brandy's kid is an unvaccinated kid. Brandy's message was partially inspired by the fact that she was so surprised that her kid is so healthy, and these other kids are like, whoa.
Same path every single time because they can attack us. But you...
And she's saying here that they want us to go there every time with autism and Andrew Wakefield because then they can attack us. And so this is a woman in 2019 who has been working with Andrew Wakefield for 20 years. Or maybe it's 15. Already had a book. And there's another book. Right? So she's still saying it correct in 2019, mostly because I think Brandy got her to say it right. Brandy gave her these words. That Andrew Wakefield is an op. That talking about autism is an op, that talking about it is always arguing things that won't convince anybody. It would be much better to go for the unvaccinated population and show how healthy they are. That is a talking point of Brandy Vaughn, I'm sure of it. That's why they had to have Paul Thomas absorb it. That's why they have James Lyons Weiler around to absorb it. That's why they're now promoting Sabine Hazan as somebody who matters. That's why they never promote Susan Humphreys.
Cannot attack the generations and generations of the health of the unvaccinated. Vax2 doesn't even begin to cover the health of the unvaccinated. We uncovered so much. We uncovered generations and generations standing there saying, we've never had any cancer in our family. We've never had rheumatoid arthritis in our family. We've never had diabetes. We've never had any of these things that you...
So she's suggesting that a lot of these things that have been justified as genetically caused are not genetically caused. And so the flip side is, of course, that they're not genetically caused. They're caused by exposure. They're caused by disruption. They're caused by injury. And so that would go against all things, all things personalized medicine go out the window then. And so she's still off message right here. She's still basically saying Andrew Wakefield is a waste and a distraction. And it's remarkable because she'll never say this again, not for 5 years. And she'll never be on screen again unless she's got somebody there like Mary Holland.
That are just common elderly conditions. They don't have them in their families. And as we went deeper and deeper into the world of the unvaccinated, the team could see, this is why they don't do the vax-unvax study. This is why they're trying to censor us and stop us, and they're petrified of these people speaking out. Because when the world knows about the health of the unvaccinated, game over.
Imagine saying that at the beginning, before the pandemic started, saying that, and then in the start of the pandemic, being coerced into accepting that the only message you can have is about censorship and health freedom. Because that's what happened to Polly. I don't know how or why or whatever, but she went all in. Maybe because she never dreamed that it would be this long of an operation. She thought she could move to America and it would all end. Instead, her whole shtick got recycled. Everything that she had to do for votes in the UK, she's essentially done for whatever network she's done it for here. Apparently, it's the same network that really wants Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be president, like since 2008 when they released this book with Jesse Ventura, where in the 16th chapter epilogue, it is headline, Ventura spells out independent platform, challenges two leading parties to debate, Kennedy joins the debate, nuclear bombs allegedly in Iran, president declares martial law after Iranian terror bombs, and then leading protesters to the White House gates, Ventura is shot by a lone gunman, and former governor clinging to life, officials denying plight or pot, and then all of a sudden you have, of course, the vice president being Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's actually in this book right here. These are the headlines of the epilogue. Let me just read it. Epilogue, glimpse of the future. Headline, Ventura says presidential candidacy is real. Headline, Ventura sets date for Iraq withdrawal, the day he takes office. Headline, Ventura spells out an independent platform. You want to see it? Think I'm full of it. Headline, Ventura challenges leading two-party contenders to a debate. Who is it? Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, McCain, Huckabee. This is in 08. Headline, as two-party conventions near, Maverick Independent Ventura rises in the polls. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. leaves Democratic Party, agrees to join Ventura as a running mate. You see why you need to buy this book? This is a Skyhorse book. So you're telling me that a Skyhorse book written in 2008 is just randomly saying in an epilogue that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. leaves the Democratic Party and agrees to join Jesse Ventura. So now it says, headline, Ventura Kennedy candidates or ticket surges in the polls. Sweet. Other candidates back down, invite Ventura and Kennedy to join the debates. U.S. bombs alleged nuclear sites in Iran. President declares martial law after Iranian terror bombs go off in 5 cities. Leading protesters to the White House, Ventura is shot by a lone gunman. I'm not laughing anymore, guys. I'm not laughing anymore. This book is a Skyhorse book published in 2008. And a lot of these other books that titrate the truth of Brandy Vaughn were all published way before the pandemic. These people could have said it better. They've never been able to say it better because they've always been misled. Maybe she was misled by Wakefield for a decade too. I don't know. I don't know how to figure it out anymore. I want other people to work on this. Because these same people who, again, could have acknowledged the franchise player and the franchise player's excellent language, instead got to step in front of her and stepped in front of her at the beginning of the pandemic. And by the end of December, she would be dead, right? The 7th of December in 2020, she'd be dead. So these people were put in place. It's not Brandy who's out there in front. It's these people. Podcasting all over. It's Kevin McKernan who's on podcast after podcast talking about the PCR test. Kevin McKernan of the Human Genome Project and Judy Mikovits being promoted by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from his own house in 2020. That's not using the franchise player available to you. Why isn't Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at this table with Brandy Vaughn right now? Instead, at the table with somebody who collaborated with Tony Fauci and Rischetti and Gallo. She ran in all the same circles that Robert Malone ran around in those days of AIDS. And yet, instead of promoting Brandy Vaughn while she's still alive in 2020, he sits down in his house with Judy Mikovits. These people took us for a ride, and we are still riding with them And the franchise players, they sit on the bench. They have to sit behind these people. These people will never help my family. These people will never help your family. And they will not save our grandchildren. They are traitors to them. They are traitors to them for not telling you and explaining
Americans
to you
when we're only
that
4%
this
of
is
the world
murder.
population, because the CDC said our immune system. No, it is related, Pamela, and let me say why. Because the entire
No, it is related, Pamela, and let me say why. Now, remember, we watched this the other day as an example of what the left is going to do with this, because, again, the whole measles narrative has been set up over a decade. That's why Mary Holland was on a TV program in 2015, why the Vaxxed movie came out in 2016, and 17 came too, and 18 came too, and the World Mercury Project changed its name in 2018 to Children's Health Defense, and that's why in all that time you never hear about Brandy Vaughn and her very simple message that ingesting a pharmaceutical is a lot safer than injecting one, and yet for some reason we assume that injecting them is great. And we're mandating it, and we're making them more and more abundant. What are we doing? And so now we have another false good guy being inserted into the narrative that might even believe that he's good guy and just finally got his chance, but he's got the wrong message. So he's either, again, in the right place at the right time with the wrong words, or he's working against us happily as part of this team.
coverage of Bobby Kennedy is around measles. The Democrats said the word measles 25 times in the first hearing.
And so that's not by accident. And him pointing it out is not by accident. It is exactly what was intended and scripted all those years ago, putting Bobby Kennedy in a position about measles and his anti-vax stance to be framed in the context of the measles as a disease and the measles as a live attenuated vaccine. The whole thing was planned because, again, the limited spectrum of debate reinforces the idea that what? That intramuscular injection can be a really great way to administer medicine. And that's a lie. And so this argument presupposes that there is a combination of substances that can be injected and have wonderful medical results. It's just that maybe not this one.
Said the words obesity, diabetes, and chronic disease 0 time. The HHS priority document under President Biden said the word equity 25 times, said the word vaccine.
Sorry, pause it one more second. I really get frustrated hearing people like this talk and think they should be muzzled, but just say...
And think they should be muzzled. You see, and what I want to show you with this is how far the left has gone with these young people. These are the kinds of young people I'm talking about. Although she's an actor, he's probably not. And even if they are, they kind of believe what they're saying. Otherwise, they couldn't act with this much emotion. And it's terrifying, really, if you think about it, because it is done precisely by the malevolent coordination of this limited spectrum of debate that it goes between Paul Offit and Callie Means.
There's a reason.
And so, of course, this guy then has portrayed it as being a complete win, and obviously the truth is finally out there, but he still is not saying intramuscular injection is dumb. And this guy's not American, but he's all over American YouTube and American social media, just like John Campbell was, and just like a lot of these other foreigners were. And at some point, you're going to have to realize that American social media and American discussions should not be dominated artificially by people like Russell Brand or Jordan Peterson or Jessica Rose or any of these other clowns. And yet it was for 5 years. And so nobody and nothing is in this narrative by chance. You must start there. Start with that truth, and then you can start to see it, because everyone has a timeline, and it doesn't matter who you look at. If you just look at their timeline objectively, you're going to find out whether they progressed, who they interacted with, and how that resulted in progression or not. And how is it possible that Jessica Rose could have been on so many podcasts with so many people in so many groups and now be a fellow of the Brownstone Institute and a fellow of the International Medical Alliance or Independent Medical Source or whatever the hell they are, and all these other accolades and awards and whatever, and have not progressed at all in her understanding of what occurred? How is it possible that Mary Holland was against the MMR vaccine or some component of it in 2015 and hasn't progressed at all in 10 years? How is it possible that Polly was saying it so well in 2019 and now for the last 5 years has said it so ham-fistedly, shittily that she's not done anything, if not by design? How is it possible that Meryl Nass has been involved in this stuff for so long, that Robert Malone and Stephen Hatfield acknowledged on Tommy's podcast that they both know her, have a long history with her, and Hatfield even said, "Oh, I don't even want to talk about her. I don't like her." It's all admissions, ladies and gentlemen, that it's one big show. It's a theater. It is a Mystery Science Theater 2025 that we are currently involved in. For the last couple years, I've been harassed by people from Panda coordinating with somebody by the name of Jessica Hockett because they kept making me believe that they understood what I was saying when I said RNA cannot pandemic. And it culminated in a couple Substacks that are going to go in a book and a lot of fake links and a lot of citing other people and anonymous accounts and other meddlers in it, like that don't deserve to be cited for anything, like Vinay Prasad from Stanford, because it's all one show. And these happy little accidents are evidence of the malevolence. It's not a happy little accident that Robert Malone was testing out his shtick with Paul Cottrell in 2021. It's not some happy little accident that Kevin McCairn showed up in my town, wanted to meet me. It's not some happy accident that Charles Rixey just happened to join Drastic and want to come to my house and explain to me that the diffuse proposal was definitely real. It's not by accident that my name is in this book. It's a mistake. It's a mistake that they have made, and it's an admission. And if you see all of these happy accidents not as happy accidents, but as admissions, and then try to line them up, what really lines it up is the fact that none of them have progressed in their understanding, in their ability to message this, or in their priority of messaging. Anybody who doesn't have a priority story at this point is very suspect. And I can respect people who think that the priority story right now is the murder and lies that's happening in the Middle East. I'm fine with that. It's just not the one for me. For me, it is the long, long list of lies about the biosecurity state and its role in our governance. That to me is most important. And this message or list of messages is most important for me to pass on to my children and those children that are around my children, because this performance is going to go on. As long as social media is being used skillfully by our children, then they will be vulnerable to the same performance that we were vulnerable to, only a much more rehearsed and reiterated and fine-tuned version of it. Every time this kind of thing is rolled out on us, it's going to be better. And that's why we just have to get off of social media, or we are already trying to play their script. And so you can get off of social media, and then they can't use an eclipse against you. They can't take a known natural phenomenon and fool you with it, which is what they did here. They knew that the population pyramid predicted that there would be a lot of old people dying for the next decade or so, and that we didn't have a lot of people replacing them. And so that was going to fundamentally change the economic structure of all of the West. They've seen this coming for a long time, and they've planned to invert it to steal our sovereignty of our grandchildren for many decades. This is a multi-generational plan, and you need to have a long enough time horizon to see that Bill Gates' father had seen it coming. that Kevin McKernan's dad was probably recruited by people who've seen it coming, that somebody like Joshua Lederberg was smart enough to see it coming. And so I'm sorry I didn't let that play, but that's basically what is happening here. These people performed a dinner theater, and we've accepted it as real. And that dinner theater has taken a known biological phenomenon and repurposed it to teach our children a mythology about what RNA can do that it can't do. And that myth is perpetuated by these traitors because they don't address the murder. And they lie about this novel virus and how it's detected, how it's monitored. It's all the same. It's all lying about a phenomenon that there's lots of data about, just shown in very obfuscating sort of ways instead of with clarity. That's what we have here. And that's what social media allows them to do. That's what all these organizations help them to do and coordinate it on social media. That's all it is. It's a limited spectrum of debate curated by these people. And if there are a few innocent people in this picture, then those innocent people will feel the pressure that we are creating, and they might finally realize what's going on and be part of the way that this gets broken. Because Denny Rancourt is curating the idea that there's no epidemiological evidence of spread. He's just not telling you that there's a population pyramid signal. He's pretty sure that doesn't exist, even though I can show it on a very simple graph. You can see the slope. All they had to do was sweep a little bit of this together with a little bit of murder to make it sharp. Maybe even forge some death certificates. Murder and lies, ladies and gentlemen, creates the myth of a pandemic. That's it. And a bunch of happy little accidents hides it for 5 years. You can see it in their timelines. The timeline of Brett Weinstein reveals it all the way up until his latest podcast. The timeline of happy accidents of Kevin McKernan also reveals it. The happy accidents of all this promotion. It's all happy little accidents. Kevin McKernan's, these guys in Canada losing my videos, it's all just happy accidents. Jessica Hockett blocking me all over the place, but saying almost everything that I'm saying except for murder is a happy accident. Kevin McKernan's role in this, just a happy accident. Kevin's promotion by CHD in 2024 by Mary Holland, just a happy accident that he doesn't say that intramuscular injection is dumb, or that Mary doesn't question him about it, because that would be crazy, right? It would be crazy if Mary had the Human Genome Director, Research and Development Director on the mic and said, hey, what about the vaccine schedule in general? What do you think about that? Because I've been campaigning against some aspect of the MMR shot since 2015 and before. And instead, 1 month later, we have Kevin McKernan on the Danny Jones podcast lying about the writing of this book and editing me out and inserting some character that actually showed up at my house 3 years ago, meddled with my family 3 years ago. This guy's lying about it. And I want to know why. And I think you should want to know why too. I think that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. should want to know why. I think that the seller and printer of the book, Skyhorse Publishing and Children's Health Defense, want to know why this guy's lying about Charles Rixey's role in the writing of that book. But instead, they're promoting him. Everyone. That's how you see. Because the reason why they're doing it is because Children's Health Defense and ICANN will never tell you that the U.S. vaccine schedule is a criminal enterprise. They will never compare it to other vaccine schedules in the West and show you how it's a criminal enterprise, because that would break the illusion. Like Brandy would have broken the illusion had they just put her in front. Like the list of murder would have dispelled the illusion if they would have just put it in front. If they would have just talked about the opioid crisis the other day, and for example, as my friend Mark Kulak said, if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would have just gone on the news and said, you know, I'm really sad that somebody has died of measles in Texas. I'm not absolutely sure what's going on there. It's a real tragedy, but a bigger tragedy is that 300 Americans will die today of opioids and nobody cares. And that 100,000, roughly between 100,000 and 120,000 have died every year for the last 5 years and nobody cares. So I do think that there are problems that we could address that would save more American lives than this one. And he could have just dunked. But instead, he allowed Fox News to write something that looks like RFK's opinion is that everybody should just boost up on their measles, even though it's not what he said. It's what Fox wrote underneath the title, RFK's opinion. That's how we're being played here by these people who claim to solve the mystery. And yet none of them are telling you the truth right now. None of them are telling you the truth about injection versus ingestion. That, you could say it like me, an intramuscular injection is dumb. They're not even going to tell you that I exist, even though I'm listed in the book, even though they all have met me, all have podcasted with me, all have sent me love notes and letters. Because they don't want the truth to get out, ladies and gentlemen. They do not want the truth that intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfection in healthy humans was always criminal. That there's no safe vaccine. That intramuscular injection of medicine is a lie. They don't want you to realize. And the way that you can figure it out is look at their time, look at their calendar, fill it out for every one of them, and you will find the truth. And then you can pass that on to your grandkids. That's what I hope this stream will inspire everybody to do. I hope it will inspire you to double check what these people really did, because they haven't done anything. They are working for the slavers. They speak, slaves speak, because this is about your grandchildren. It's for all the marbles. That's why they've never told you the truth about ingestion versus injection. That's why they've never told you the truth. That's why they won't tell you that PCR as a diagnostic is a fraud. That's why they won't explain that all of these companies already could make synthetic recombinant genes and genetics and grow stuff, because that's how biologics are made. And so making a transfection would have been really easy. In fact, also planting any sequence they wanted to and guaranteeing that you would find it wherever they wanted to find it could have been done simply using a synthetic recombinant pure signal made in quantity and released by an agent in Wuhan. They did this because transfection would be a crime otherwise. They had to do it this way. They had to lie about it. And the way they got away with it, I think, has to do with placebo. That's why the no virus people like Andy Kaufman didn't explain it right. That's why Kevin McCarran didn't explain it right. Kevin McKernan didn't explain it right. And why the VAERS queen, Jessica Rose, has never explained it right, because they don't want to tell you the truth. They can't tell you the truth. And if they did, this whole thing would be over. Even the no virus people can't succinctly explain that endemicity is a joke, because endemicity means that an RNA can start in a mud puddle and then be everywhere forever. And that would only be true if we were doing it. It would only be true if those signals were actually our own. They can't be pattern integrities on their own, because RNA is not a pattern integrity. They can't pandemic, and they could have done this with non-specific PCR tests that pick up the background. And all of these people know it. And that's why I call them liars, because I think that's what they are. They're all just liars. And it's really unfortunate, but they really are. They're all just plain and simple. They're all just liars. It's so depressing. It really is. Sometimes it's really depressing. I don't know what to do. But I guess I got to just keep going, and I got to hope that more people will support and keep this going until we can pivot to teaching the Biology 101 and know that these people are exposed. I can't stop until this past is guaranteed not to fade away, until it is recorded and archived and becomes common knowledge. Thank you very much for being here, and I will see you again as soon as I have a slide deck worthy of presenting. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, guys. I really appreciate it. I got a lot of good books to read in the next coming weeks. The History of Virology by Watterson and Wilkinson's a good book. Virus Diseases by River, Stanley, Kunkel, Shope, Horsfall, and Ruse is a really interesting book. Rinderpest. This is a book from very early 1900s in America. And then this Advances in Experimental Medicine and Biology book about virology from the early 80s. a coronavirus meeting in the Netherlands. These books are going to help us to figure out where this illusion started to become just an assumption, and how it was weaponized against us. I'm really optimistic that this is far from over. It's just sometimes so hard to swim in this. It's really like a nasty taint that I feel after I'm here, and so I need to go to the gym right now and get a couple hundred jump shots in. Thank you very much. I'll see you again as soon as possible, I promise. I just don't want to just stream to stream. I want to have a succinct message, even if it takes 2 hours and 31 minutes to get it out. Thanks very much, guys.